Alright, so we're back. Here's the second half of the list. Again, sorry it took me so long. Apparently I tend to ramble a lot in these videos. Alright, now this next one, number 6. You might notice there's no gameplay footage in the corner for this game, and that's because I can't play it, unfortunately. I have a couple copies, but for reasons I'll explain in a moment, I can't use any of them. The game is Metal Combat, which is actually a follow-up to another game for the Super Nintendo, both involving the light gun, aka Super Scope, which is this lovely behemoth right here. The problem with this is that light guns do not work on high-def TVs, which is what I have, so there's no way for me to actually play this. I can plug it in, I can view the start screen, and unfortunately that's about it. So even if you manage to find the game and a working Super Scope, being able to play it will be difficult because most people don't still have boob tube TVs floating around anymore. But despite the fact that I can't play it, it's still an amazing game. Basically what happens is you go through a story mode where you are inside a giant mech suit that somehow fits two people, one to pilot and one to shoot. And you blow the crap out of other giant mechs that will throw all array of missiles, bombs, and various other things at you. So not only are you shooting these mechs, which will move around the screen as well as off the screen occasionally, but you also have to try and shoot down their projectiles. So it's fun and interesting and very original, and it's also insanely challenging. So if you somehow find a way to get this to work, either via emulation, which always sucks, or if you have an old enough TV and find everything you need to play it, then I definitely recommend spending some time on this. It will be a great use of a few hours, if not more. Because like I said, it is kind of challenging. Don't expect to beat it on your first go through. I promise you're not that good. Alright, we're getting to the really good stuff now. For number 5, I've got Ninja Warriors. And I know that sounds weird because this is kind of an obscure title, but this is actually a really great game. It's a side-scrolling beat-em-up similar to like River City Ransom or Golden Axe. However, in this one, it's straight-on 2D side-scrolling. You don't have to worry about the 3 dimensions, which makes it a little easier because you don't have to worry about whether or not you're perfectly in line with someone to be able to hit them. On this, you just beat the crap out of everything that appears. Enemies still appear in great number and with a variety of different moves and attacks, so it's still going to give you a really good challenge, and it'll keep you going for a while, especially when you get to some of the later bosses and your just regular straight-on attacks won't actually do anything. So expect to have fun, but also be very challenged in this. It does, however, give you an array of 3 different characters to play with, each with not only different moves, but different specials and attacks. One is slower, one's a little faster. The one I always play that you can see in the footage is kind of a mix between fast and effective. Also, all the characters seem to have a really good move set. There's a good array of different moves and abilities you can use, different combos, so it's not just your basic punch, kick, block, and occasionally jump. There's a little more to it than that a lot of times. Depending on your angle and the order you hit the attacks, you can do various moves. You can throw people in multiple directions. You can also use a lot of the environment to actually attack. So it's a really good game. It's really fun. I'm not even huge into beat-em-ups, but this is one I definitely recommend. So if you find a copy, which I wouldn't imagine will be too hard because I don't know many people that have a copy or care to have a copy, so you can probably pick it up easy, and if you do, I highly recommend it. It's great. Alright, now we've got another game made by Rare back when they weren't contractually obligated to Microsoft to ignore their great franchises like Cameo and Killer Instinct and instead make games about forcing piñatas to mate. We had Donkey Kong Country 2. This game is astounding in every possible way, and if you prefer Donkey Kong Country 1, you can swap it interchangeably. I just happen to prefer this one, but tomato, potato. The music and graphics are both astounding, even for the Super Nintendo. Most people agree that this whole franchise kind of showcased what the Super Nintendo could really do. The gameplay itself too is also amazing. Everything in here just feels and moves very fluid. The controls are tight, responsive, just incredible. The level design and everything is set up really well. Also, if you happen to be like myself and you're a bit of a completionist with old school games, then this will drive you mad because every level has not only the exit, but also a hidden Donkey Kong coin and the 4 letters to spell Kong that you have to try and find throughout the level. And throughout the first world, they're for the most part easy to find, but then after that, it becomes a bitch to try and locate everything. So you will have a hell of a time getting 100% completion on this game. Also, aside from just being a great platformer, this is yet another game that Nintendo thought was amazing as well, because not only has it been re-released a couple different times, but you will find all sorts of remakes of Donkey Kong Country for a multitude of consoles, and I doubt that'll stop anytime soon, because Nintendo really isn't on the original idea bandwagon. Once they find something that works, they beat it to death. Alright, now the next 3 games, honestly, I would have been happy no matter what order I put them in, and it took me a while to figure out which order I was going to do them in. So, I'm just going to assume what I have is okay, because I'm not even sure 100% myself. But for number 3, Super Mario RPG. This game is beyond astounding. First off, this is probably the single most deserving of a sequel of any game I've ever played. This was probably one of the best things to happen to the Mario franchise. Not only is it an amazing RPG and an amazing Mario game, but it's just an astounding game on its own right. The RPG elements are great, the different characters all play and feel very differently. It gives you a really good variety. You will constantly swap between them because you'll want to level them all and use each of their different skills in different scenarios. Also, the moves in this, unlike a lot of games, are actually interactive. Most of them you can time to do various things, either to increase the effectiveness of your block, or increase the attack power of your attack, or even double, triple, or infinitely raise the amount of times you can attack, depending on how well you time it. So, it adds a lot of challenge, it keeps you going. Again, I know I sound like a dead horse saying the music and graphics are great, but graphics not so much, but music is a huge thing for me in games, and this actually has really catchy, great music. The Lost Woods theme, for example, which is playing right now, will get stuck in your head for the rest of your damn life. And actually, if you go online, there's even a parody of the song making that point. So you could tell it's had an effect on a couple people. It also introduced a couple new characters to the Mario world, Geno and Mallow, which we haven't seen since. I keep hoping they'll show up in another RPG or even in Mario Kart, but I'm guessing because this was also a Square project, they hold the rights to those characters and at least half of this game, and probably don't want to release it back to Nintendo without a whole crap load of money. And unfortunately, I doubt Nintendo at this point has that much money to throw around, because they can't seem to make a console that will generate any kind of income. Also, speaking of Square and Final Fantasy, this has a not quite Final Fantasy character, but very familiar to the franchise character Culex, which will make you think constantly of Final Fantasy, even down to the 4 crystal cohorts he has floating around him as you battle him. It also lets you play as a lot of familiar Nintendo characters, or at least see a couple of them as cameos. Bowser, Peach, Mario, of course, can all be in your party. But you'll also encounter Link, Samus, Luigi, lots of other Nintendo characters you've seen and loved. It's just, there's a lot of humor, a lot of little just quick snippets to remind you of various other things. This whole thing was obviously a labor of love because it was tied together incredibly, it was made wonderfully, and it even holds up now. I mean, playing this just to make this video was just as fun as when I first played it, and when I'm done posting this, I'll probably actually go play it some more and finish getting through the game. So, you should all really get a copy, and if my next video is late, that's probably why. Alright, number 2, and it was really hard for me to make this number 2 and not number 1, but Zelda: Link to the Past. This is, in my opinion, the greatest Zelda game ever made. Even if you don't agree with me, if you're one of the people that thinks Ocarina of Time, or God help you, Majora's Mask, this still usually makes the top 3 of anyone's top anything list of Zelda games, or even SNES games. This introduced a lot of new things that Zelda had not done before, including direction and storyline, which you didn't really get a whole lot of in Zelda 1 or 2. A lot of the items you get in here, for example, the hookshot, Zora's flippers, a lot of the other things, have carried through in almost every other game we've played since then. The music was astounding, the graphics and some of the effects were incredible. The storyline itself was actually really good as far as Zelda games go. So good at least that they decided to make a sequel. So, you know, that had to kind of warrant something. Also, just some of the humor, just some of the other fun things that happen in the game, the little quips between characters. It really made it fun to play through. I've gone through and replayed this, I can't even tell you how many times. Also, another thing that's actually great here is a lot of secondary quests or hidden items that you don't necessarily need to beat the game, but really kind of enhance it. There's all sorts of extra weapons you can get. There's different fairies that when you visit and throw in bits of your inventory, they will give you better items to definitely increase or enhance the way you play. There's a lot of stuff going on in this game. You could play this for hours and hours and still not find everything. So, if you haven't played it at all, A, I don't know if you dislike the Zelda franchise or just fun, but you're certainly missing out. And B, you need to go get a copy and play it right now, because this really is probably one of the best games I've ever played. And also, obviously, the second best game I've ever played on the Super Nintendo. So that's gotta mean something. Alright, and now finally, the number one game, the one that I think hands down is just the best Super Nintendo game ever. Maybe not hands down, because it was kind of a toss-up between the last two and this one. But the best Super Nintendo game I can think of that I've ever played, seen, whatever, is Yoshi's Island. I may get flack for this, but hear me out. This introduced a lot of new stuff to the Mario franchise, the whole Baby Mario, Baby Bowser, that kind of deal. But even if you take Mario out of the equation and just look at this as a generic platformer, this is probably the best platformer I've ever played. The crayon-drawn graphics and theme in the game is just really fun, the way they carried it all out and made it all work together. The music in this game is done by Koji Kondo, who has done the music for almost every Mario game, and is just astounding. The gameplay also is really great in this. The controls are fun. All the fun. They're also tight and responsive is what I was actually going to say. The levels are amazingly designed. It's very difficult, fun, and challenging, but it never really gets boring or frustrating. It's difficult, but just the right amount to really keep you interested. There's a lot of hidden things in each level, different flowers, red coins, and stars you have to find. So for a completionist, it's either a dream or a nightmare, depending on how you look at it. You will play this over and over and over, though, to try to find and complete everything, only to then spring up bonus levels and extra stuff you have to do. So this will keep you going forever, and honestly, I don't have a single bad thing to say about the game. The only negative I think anyone could really think of is that damn crying noise that Mario makes every time he falls off your back. And it has to be one of the worst noises I've ever heard. It instantly induces panic. Yeah, that noise. That's terrible. However, it's really effective, because in the game you hear that noise and you instantly become urgent to get Mario back on Yoshi and continue on normally. So, even if it is annoying, it's incredibly effective and does what it's supposed to do. So honestly, I have no bad things to say about this game, and tons of good things to say. This is the best game I've ever played for Super Nintendo, and if you don't have the console and we're going to pick it up and can only get one game, how the hell tight is your budget? But if that is the case somehow, this is the one you should get. I know people are going to give me some flack because there's a couple games that they think should be on the list. For example, Chrono Trigger is the one that people are going to throw at me instantly. So let me point out that I do have a couple honorable mentions, this being one of them, the other two being another couple RPGs that are great, and that would be Seventh Saga and my copy of Bahamut Lagoon, which, there it is, right here. These are also both great games, as is Chrono Trigger. The issue is the 15 games on my list are all, for me anyway, nostalgic. Those are the games that were out at the time. I was able to get a copy and played through them all ever since I was a kid. So on top of already being great games, that nostalgia factor just puts them that little bit more above everything else. So while these are all great, these aren't games that I played growing up for good reason, especially with Chrono Trigger. This is very hard to get a hold of. Bahamut Lagoon was never actually released here, and it wasn't until recently I found a place that could port it to a cartridge with an English translation so that I could even play through it properly. So while these are great, they're not games that most of us played as kids and really shouldn't be on a list. So yeah, that's my list. Those are the games. You're welcome to disagree. I mean, everyone's allowed to have their own wrong opinion. And if you do disagree, go ahead and shoot me some comments. Let me know what shouldn't be on the list, what you think I missed, if you hate Super Nintendo entirely, and go ahead and try and name 15 good games on the Genesis. Whatever you want to do, really. Other than that, I got nothing for you. So, see ya.